지금부터 제10회
Now, I'd like to move on to the last part of today's seminar, panel discussion. Panel discussion will be moderated by Mr. Song-woo Lee of KMI. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Song-woo Lee of KMI. It's been 4 years since I have served as the moderator of the last session of this Arctic Shipping Seminar. I'd like to thank Professor Hong as well as the Yongsan University Institute of Arctic Logistics for having me today. So far, we have discussed many topics, and I'm entirely certain that, we as a seminar have developed and advanced so far, and the discussion have become much more profound and in-depth. Well, at first, we focus so much on the risks and opportunities and the benefits created by the use of Arctic shipping route. But from several years ago, we came to identify various issues and the risks and how to address those issues and risks with new technologies and skills and solutions, as well as the researches on the way. In particular, today's seminar is even more significant because we have active participation from Russia, which has the largest territory in the Arctic region. And we also have Mr. Jibo, who is a site team manager, site team head of Subcomplot in Korea. He addressed various experiences in project, and other presenters also that touched upon the technological improvement. And last but not least, President Hong talked about the construction of transshipment hub on the NSR and the role of Korea to be played in this regard. I believe I'm here to be a timekeeper and manager. That is why I'd like to cut it short. And I would like to introduce today's panels. Mr. Dr. Gunnarsson of Nord University of Norway. And the second panel is Professor Ochuka Natsuhito of Hokkaido University, who has been working with us quite closely for such a long time. Last but not least, we have Mr. Sokta Park of Sinocor. First, I'd like to turn to Dr. Gunnarsson on the presentations from the perspective of a scientist, or from the perspective of the one in Norway. Or if you have any questions now, this is your opportunity to share your questions with the audience. First, we have 3 panels, so I can give 10 minutes to each panel. Dr. Gunnarsson, please.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation to this interesting seminar. It's always a pleasure to interact with those that year after year participate in this important event in South Korea. I would like to start with a short remark regarding international shipping on the Northern Sea route. By international shipping, I mean shipping by non-Russian companies and or shipping to and from non-Russian ports. Maritime infrastructure development along the Northern Sea route is being developed as a necessity to bring large quantities of energy and mineral resources from the Russian Arctic to the global market and support Russia's own domestic shipping and shipbuilding industry. Russian resource extraction companies in the Arctic are now building their own shipping fleets to bring commodities out of the remote areas of the NSR. Subsequently, the role of non-Russian shipping companies is no less than envisioned, say, 10 years ago. But Russia needs foreign infrastructure investments. It is common for big international shipping companies to invest heavily in port facilities in support of their own logistics operations along established transport routes. However, international shipping companies already using traditional routes will not easily alter their own long established logistics operations. The Russian government has concluded that only when regular year-round navigation serving resource extraction projects in the Russian Arctic is established, will the international shipping industry start to show real interest in the Northern Sea route. Russia is predicting that regular year-round transportation will be the norm on the NSR already during the second half of this decade. But even if infrastructure materializes, a booming international transit business will not start automatically. Russia cannot decide the potential for international transit shipping. On the other hand, positive international market developments and reduced geopolitical tensions will not help if supportive Russian policies and framework conditions are not in place. Conditions for large-scale investments by the international shipping industry and cargo producers for use of the NSR is still not in place. Besides, there are uncertainties about Russia's long-term policies. It remains an open question whether Russian preferences will support de facto monopoly on Arctic transits, for example, container shipping, rather than encourage competition from international shipping companies. International shipping on the NSR has been dominated by the European shipping companies, with only a handful of Asian companies being involved each year. Transport of commodities from the NSR to European ports takes place much more frequently than to ports in the Asian Pacific region. Companies based in Northwest Europe have extensive experience of operating ice-strengthened cargo vessels in sea ice during the winter in the Baltic Sea, and some of these have been used on Arctic voyages during the summer-fall season on the NSR. European companies also have extensive experience in the transport of heavy lift cargoes and in offshore support, as well as in dredging operation in European coastal ports and rivers. This expertise and equipment have been in demand in the Russian Arctic and will likely continue to be so for several planned extraction projects. A major limitation on the use of the NSR as an international shipping route has been the availability of ice-strengthened vessels of different segments and sizes for use on Arctic voyages. However, international shipping companies will not invest in expensive ice-class vessels only for spot market deliveries of goods during parts of the year. They need year-round shipping, a sustainable cargo base, and confidence in stable framework conditions if they are going to undertake large investments in ice-strengthened vessels. Some companies may be reluctant to engage in Arctic transport due to public concerns about perceived environmental risks. Yet Russia can claim that shorter sailing distances using the NSR translate into reduced emissions. And if enough LNG-powered vessels are introduced, climate-related arguments in favor of the NSR will be strengthened. So at the end of the day, it is the global maritime industry that will decide when the shorter Arctic route is safe, efficient, reliable, environmentally sound, and economically viable in the comparison with other routes across the world's ocean. So thank you. That was my short remark in the beginning.
Thank you very much, Professor Gunnarsson, about the perspective of the global maritime or shipping industry, what the Russian government needs to do, and what it takes for them to attract the global shipping companies, and how they can really make investment. And in particular, for the NSR, the Russian shipping companies' role is going down, and that's one thing that we need to take note. Their roles are getting weaker, which can put the Russian government at disadvantage. And we need to have the port infrastructure, but the global shipping companies and the loading companies are developing that. And the Berg port are sometimes developed by the cargo owners. But in this time of uncertainty, the mineral or the resource development is now being done by the Russian government. And you pointed out the issues and this whole route. The Russian government, if they claim that it's their own route, then the most shipping companies may not use that. So that is also another political risk. So the Russian government need to take that into account. And also for the spot route, they may not invest a huge amount of money in building this ice breaking or the ice strengthened vessels. So NSR is an important game changer for the future. But how to have the economic feasibility, there are some obstacles that we need to tackle. So that was the comment from the Professor Gunnarsson. He's also talked about the perspective of Norway, which is also a member of the Arctic Council. So let's hear from the Japanese perspective, Dr. Ochika Natsuhiko. Please share your comments and also your perspectives from Japan about the progress of these Arctic shipping routes, please.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me? Right?
Yes.
Okay. So I'd like to talk about what of the determinants of the Trans-Northern Sea Route commercial shipping. And as of the end of 2019, more than 300 Trans-Northern Sea Route voyages were carried out between Atlantic and Pacific Ocean ports. And all these attempts were temporal destination shipping, and mainly bulk cargo was transported. And basically, most of voyages were successfully completed without notable delay or problem. And through these accumulated experiences, shipping market might gradually gain practical knowledge of the Northern Sea route for their businesses. And based on these experiences, the determinants of the Trans-Northern Sea route shipping could be summarized several issues. Firstly, sea ice retreat enables to expand summer navigable period and chance to match time-dependent cargo demand and ice class ship schedule. But it would be hard to find high ice class cargo vessels that can sail the Northern Sea route in winter, and it is not easy to achieve competitive shipping costs in near future. So the discussion of year-round shipping of general cargo would be a matter of long-term view. And the fuel price is one of the key elements of the Northern Sea route shipping cost. And if the higher the fuel price becomes, the Northern Sea route shipping cost feasibility against the Suez Canal route becomes more competitive. And availability of Russian nuclear icebreaker is often questioned, but it is not serious issues under recent sea ice retreat in midsummer to fall seasons. However, if shipping activity expands to ice existing season, a nuclear and number of ships start to enter the Northern Sea route, this would be important issues. And the ice and weather forecast are achieving both Russian information service, which was introduced today, and non-Russian commercial service as well. And satellite monitoring of sea ice is also achieving, but still there remain many issues to be developed. And among these issues, but the key issues for business possibility across the Arctic Ocean could be ice class ship availability and navigation safety and punctuality and market demand and sustainability. And some are still uncertain, but in many issues, situation is drastically developed in these years. And among them, building ice class ship might be a risky decision for private sectors, but under the support of Russian policy to develop year-round liner container shipment, ice class container carriers is becoming reality maybe. And this could be a starting point of new era of the Arctic shipping if possible. And in the technological point of view, ice navigation service provided by Russia, which was presented today, is very interesting and important progress for development of the Northern Sea route. And at the same time, from the commercial point of view, cargo demand between Europe and East Asia is a crucial requirement to realize the commercial container shipping across the Northern Sea route. Thank you very much.
네, 오초카
Thank you very much, Professor Otsuka. So among the well-known factors, Professor highlighted some of the key points. And the weather and ice forecast data as well as the sea ice monitoring has been especially highlighted by Professor. And the thing which grabbed my attention is ice class vessels as well as the icebreakers. There was such a disruption in the sea ice breaking operation. So it took 50 days instead of 30 days as usual. So with this, private participation would be extremely limited, since this is related to the safety as well as punctuality. So I believe the initial government support would be quite important. So the private-public cooperation and the partnership would be required in the initial days in order to address these various issues. And the second part I'd like to highlight is that the sea ice navigation system implemented by the Russian government needs to be upgraded further in order to tackle various issues identified by the professor. Due to climate change, there is a sea ice melting in the Arctic region. But as we have extreme weathers because of the climate change, in the Arctic region, there is an extreme weather conditions take place so frequently because there is no predictability whatsoever. This poses such a serious threat to the vessels, cargo vessels. This is very important. That is why this was pointed out by the professor. Thank you. I'd like to move on to the third panel. Compared to China and Japan, Korea is more sensitive to the economic feasibility. That is why shipping companies in Korea are not that interested in the Northern Sea route. And as mentioned by Professor Hong in his presentation, we can see there are preconditions that need to be met by the NSR in order for the Korean companies to take part in the use of NSR. And now this panel is working for a shipping company, so I'd like to ask him for his opinion, and I'd like to also ask Mr. Park to make a comment on the technologies required for the safe navigation and as well as the requirement for the infrastructure investment, if he has any comment or opinion on that. Please. Mr. Park is on mute. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for having me for this panel discussion. I'm Seokta Park of Sinocor. I'd like to share with you Sinocor's opinion as a shipping company, which is a potential user of NSR. Last year, I briefly introduced what this company is doing. Well, this is a company which provides container line service. And we have 78 container vessels, and we have about 400,000 TEUs of containers. And we are the ninth largest container shipping company with the 110,000 TEUs, and the cargo growth has been very consistent. In 2013, it was 101 million TEU, and in 2020, it was 3.2 million TEU. And this year, the business has grown by 15% with 3.5 million TEUs. In particular, this year, with Japan, China, and Northeast Asia, there has been a clear growth in the cargo, but the Vladivostok port, and there has been some very serious congestion in some of the Russian ports. That is why the shipping of car containers as well as the vessels containers has been put on hold. Sinocor signed an MOU in order to facilitate the development of the NSR 3 years ago. But due to the limitations in our capacity, there has been no real progress so far. However, Rosatom's transshipment hub port is under review to take place in Vladivostok, but since my company provides a feeder service between Busan port and the Vladivostok port, I believe if Vladivostok port is found to be the transshipment hub, then there will be a great opportunity. But as you know, since we are not large-scale shipping company, we cannot make any single investment on our own. That is why it will be quite critical for my company to work with any feeder service companies as well as the ocean-going carriers if in a certain alliance. Through this kind of seminar, we'll be able to pursue joint research as well as the exchange of information. I believe we need to continue this kind of effort in order to facilitate our cooperation. And 24/7 available infrastructure as well as the terminal should be realized as early as possible along the NSR so that we can encourage shipping companies to turn to use the NSR. Thank you very much.
네,
Thank you very much, Mr. Park. So he shared about these perspectives of the small, medium-sized shipping company from the Sinocor's perspective. So about the navigation into the NSR, it's not really that feasible or practically. So even though it can participate, it needs to form some alliance with the large shipping companies in Korea, and also for these in the port of Vladivostok, the feeder service cargo volume should be increased for them to increase their business or grow their business. So the feeder service route and the shuttle service for the Arctic shipping routes, they have the shuttle from Murmansk to Pebrsky to Kamchak. It may navigate in between, and they will have these icebreaker fleet, and on the other sections they will have like ice class and other vessels for the shuttle service, and it's been discussed for 5 to 6 years. And as you listen to the Professor Hong's presentation, at the very end of this whole route, not the port of Kamchak, but the port of Vladivostok is now gaining more importance and attention. And that means that these Arctic shipping routes is now getting more or becoming more relevant topic for Korea. So in other words, it means that for Russian government, they are now struggling to decide whether these Vladivostok or the other port will be better or not. So personally, I think as an expert in the international logistics business, well, given that all the conditions are the same, the port of Vladivostok is at a better or in a better position. But the port of Vladivostok, I have done a lot of studies and I've been involved in the development projects, but they also have a lot of limitations. So, how they will tackle the limitations in Russia and how they can make the progress is also what we want to know. The port of Vladivostok, with the current capacity, the vessels may not be able to get in, so maybe they have to build a new port to handle the cargo volume. So, on that point, we need to wait and see how the Russia will react, and they may want to also have some collaboration on some points with Korea. So we will discuss about that later. So, so the discussion was a bit too short. So we have some time left for the discussion. So Professor Gunnarsson and Otsuka, Natsuhiko, and Mr. Park shared some comments. And with the presenters, I'd like to find some link. And as a moderator, I'd like to ask a few questions. So first, the Dr. Gunnarsson mentioned about the Russian companies are getting or losing their roles in the maritime transport industry, and I couldn't hear the full presentation from Mr. Zibo. But as a Russian company, what do you think about the roles of the Russian shipping companies and the challenges, or your company, or I mean the Russian government, what are they want to do to grow the companies or businesses?
Hello. So basically answering your question, as far as I can see, now we are growing, so being placing the orders for the more vessels, so especially for the NSR. And as far as I know, so we also want to increase the tonnage to be transported by the Russian companies, so along the NSR as well. So there's always a risk. Okay, at the moment, so maybe the NSR, so the better just to be addressed to the operators of the Northern Sea Road. Okay, so but regarding the risks, I would like to also to remind just the recently Evergreen stuck in the Suez Channel, right? So what brought lots of the problem and lots of the losses. Okay. Okay.
네, 감사합니다.
Thank you very much. The Russian companies and the businesses are making dedicated effort in order to increase the use of the NSR and to address various risks out there. And as for the closure of the Suez Canal, as mentioned by Mr. Jibo, with that, we came to realize that there must be some alternative to the existing traditional route, but that also means that the vessels using the NSR, they try to use the NSR, but because of the delay, they, rather than using the NSR, they decided to use the Suez Canal. So these two options out there, the Suez Canal and the NSR, which one the companies would choose. So I think we will see a clearer picture in 5 years or in 10 years, whether this one is better than that one. I think that there are some issues for each route to tackle now, I believe the NSR is slightly a disadvantage, but at some point, the NSR will be able to become a compelling option, an alternative to the Suez Canal. I believe that's the point Mr. Jibo wanted to make. Then turning to Mr. Han.
인상적
You made a very impressive presentation on the R&D carrier from the perspective of the Samsung Heavy Industries technology. So there were many features like the intelligence and the others. So personally, I was wondering, as the vessels navigating the NSR, the icebreakers might be different from the vessels because the regular vessels have a lot of digital technologies. So you might be thinking about what kind of digital technologies to be applied to your icebreaker vessels. So what are the level of the digitalization, like the autonomous vessels or navigation? Well, maybe not that level, but are there any kind of simpler technologies that you are already applying or in the pipeline? Well, to briefly mention or answer the question like the autonomous vessels, well, we haven't really get to the level where we consider these technologies for the NSR navigation. It's a bit too early, and for the other than the NSR or the Arctic shipping routes, the other vessels, we have some digitalized like the navigation control systems, and we have developed and we are applying that. So that's the current status.
네.
So as for digitalization, how to apply it, well, it will take some time. That's the impression I got. Of course, the digitalization is underway, and I think there should be some interaction and communication between the vessels and the satellite and other communication infrastructure. And the port need to be equipped with various communication infrastructure. But some of the Suez Canal using route is not fully equipped. And as for the NSR, but is in the process of getting ready for the digitalization. Now, I'd like to ask Professor Hong my question. You conducted the survey, and you have been working with various shipping companies so far in order to facilitate the use of the NSR. And as you mentioned at the start, what kind of help and support and assistance from the government do you expect to be most beneficial in promoting the use of the NSR? What kind of policies of the government will be most helpful in facilitating the use of the NSR? Probably it was back in 2019. There was a discussion at the Polar Economic Council. Shipping companies were in such a difficult shape, so they did not have the capacity to pay any attention to the use of the NSR. But some of the carriers are still interested in using the NSR. So I think it will be too risky for any companies in the private sector to make the initial investment as well as to put in any initial efforts. That is why if the government is interested in leading this initiative, I believe this is something actually mentioned by our president, incumbent president, to President Putin back in 2019 or 2018. So if the government is interested in pushing forward the NSR use, then there should be a partnership formed between the public and the government. And this is also part of the outcome of the survey. And if government is willing, that it can form a certain council or consultative body with the companies, the shipping companies, And there is no way for the shipping companies to build ice-class vessels if there is no cargo. So that is why we need some government support as well as some sponsorship, or we can build a lower ice-class vessel to use it for the route to the Southeast Asian port, or we can use it for other public purpose. So I do not believe this is something that can be done by the private sector alone. That is why we need heightened attention from the government.
네, 교수님.
Thank you, Professor. So the government need to pay attention to this to further open up the NSR. But since a few years ago, I have been pointing this out. A large-scale project between Korea and Russia can be considered, and the Russian party is also talking about that. But we couldn't really involved in that because in the Siberia or the Arctic region, the resource development, joint development, then these whole resources could be about cargo, or it could generate the cargo traffic. And who would own that? The Arctic 1 and R2 and our shipping companies have a strong technology. So but they are not sure whether it can continue. So if we can really attract the cargo traffic, then we can also get the order for the shipbuilding, and then Russia and Korea can collaborate, and the shipping companies to have the cargo. We can also transport the cargoes as well. The first Arctic the vessel order, I remember it was the Daewoo Korean company, and the Samsung Heavy Industries also won the order. Or it's not operated by the Korean companies, but by the Japanese or the other countries' companies. So in that regard, we need to make some turning point and be more ambitious. So as Mr. or Professor Hong mentioned, I think some experts need to raise their voices and make the proposals to the next administration of Korea so that the cargo can be attracted for these shipping companies. So we had this one round. Usually on the internet, we can take some questions and answer the questions, or from the floor, we may take some questions. So I don't have any questions from the online. So do we have any questions?
왜요? 예. 네, 혹시 지금
Is any of the speakers who want to ask a question to each other, or if there is any question you want to ask, then we'd like to open the floor for you.
혹시 코멘트 하실 분 있으세요?
Any comment from the speakers who are joining us via the Zoom platform?
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. Alexei Bambulak, Aquaplaniva, Norway. I probably can bet that I'm on the northernmost point among those who are taking part in a seminar today. Yeah, it was extremely interesting to follow all the presentations given during the seminar. And I would like to reflect most of them and ask our panelists and probably also speakers. And most of all, probably in reflection to a presentation given by Dr. Mikhail Grigoriev about ambitious plans on developing oil and gas and coal production projects within the Northern Sea Route area. But actually the question is to dear panelists that are sitting on, so to say, both ends of the Northern Sea Route, and more in relation to relatively new and up-to-date movement on developing green ports and green shipping lanes. How this environmental friendly movement can affect the ports receiving and sending cargo through this Arctic lane, and what do you think how it may affect the ports within the Northern Sea route, if you're speaking about the transit. When actually, okay, how green should be ports within the Northern Sea route area, and what associated costs we can expect with this environmental trend for Arctic lane's development. Thank you very much.
I think it's a question for me.
Yes, for you also, Mikhail.
Okay, thanks. Alexei, you see all this zero carbon pursuit, etc. In my understanding, did not finally understand what does it mean. If you try to reduce the carbon emission during the transport operation, loading, etc., and so on, we have to keep in mind what fuel is on the table. What do we really need? Is the LNG is zero carbon fuel? I think no. You see a lot of words by Rosneft head Sechin that Vostok Oil will produce the production with practically zero carbon fluence. I think it's not supported by some technological calculation. Really, I don't know answer for your question, because in my mind it's a great distance between declaration and understanding of the practical, technical, technological result. What we really need to do. In any case, if we are talking about the structure of the Arctic fleet, I mean, of vessels who are operating in the Arctic area, yes, of course, we have such pioneers like Comfort, who used not only LNG carriers or LNG, but they did really 3 voyages by the crude oil tankers fueled by LNG, but it was just first bird. It's not a systematic decision. If we will look at the whole cabotage fleet, we really face that all these vessels use the heavy fuel. I don't know. I think that first of all, it necessary to understand how much it will be. Your question is pretty good. I don't know. I don't know, because you see, it's necessary to keep some balance. It's necessary to keep balance between penalty and some motivation for the ship owners to change the engine of the vessels, to change even the ideology of the shipping. Other issue, if we are talking about zero carbon, it's very wonderful nuclear powered vessels which have practically zero. On the other hand, we have the great restriction for the nuclear vessels operation in different ports, etc., etc. Really, we don't understand what does it mean. So I think that I will leave this question open.
네,
Thank you very much. At an international seminar, the whole economics and the environment, the experts usually have this kind of the conversation, and it's really hard to find the right balance. I also care about the environment, but from our side of the story, it's really hard to give the right answer to this whole question about striking the balance. I think it will take days and hours to really have this whole conversation. So that was it for the question. But do we have any questions from the floor or from the online participants?
네,
Okay, I think the time is up and time to close, or we have like 9 minutes to left, or okay, so if not, it's okay. From the floor, do we have any question? Who really feel that anyone who must ask a question? So Professor Park, please. The one last question. So please make it quick. Well, the question might be long, but the answer should be short. I'd like to ask a question to Professor Gunnarsson. So, in the northern, the route, the Suez transit to Europe to Asia, the service, to have the competitiveness, the NSR, it might take some time and cost. So we need the time and money for the NSR to be competitive compared to the Suez. So to have the commercial feasibility, we need to have the icebreaker. But without icebreaker, the year-round navigation must be feasible. So, and that was also mentioned from the Mr. Belkinson's presentation, but I have some other thoughts. So, Professor Gunnarsson, about having full competitiveness and having full commercial feasibility. From when do you think the NSR will be available, or the year-round navigation will be possible? What's your thoughts on this?
Yes, thank you for the question. According to Russian sources, icebreaker support will be sufficient for a year-round navigation on the Northern Sea route by the end of this decade. And but in addition to icebreaker support to be of interest to commercial shipping, obviously icebreaker support is essential and extremely important part of the overall infrastructure. But we also mentioned that there are a number of other factors that are important to the commercial international commercial shipping, and not the least the cargo base. A cargo base serving the Northern Sea route on a year-round basis or otherwise has not been identified. And this is something that really needs to be done, and some of us are tackling that question. But then there are also other things that a number of other factors that come into the picture to to be of interest. The route does not just have to be open; it has to be safe, and so the safety issue is a paramount, and a way to reduce transport delays with very detailed sea ice forecasts and services to transiting vessels. Almost real time input there is needed, and weather forecast and so forth. Then also a lot of things. There's a lot of discussion about transshipment hubs. Now, particularly for container shipping, it involves cost and additional time. And another study that hasn't been thoroughly investigated yet is what is the economics of transshipment in the Arctic? Is that the way to go? The Russian vessels are both transshipping at least part of the cargo, and they are also sailing these high ice class vessels all the way to Asia and to Europe. So what is the economics of transshipment? That's is another question. So a number of different factors come into play. An effective and predictable administrative and management system serving international shipping is also required, and so forth. So a lot of yet still a lot of issues need to be resolved.
네, 고나선 교수님.
Thank you very much, Professor Gunasan. We expected that the answer would be short, but the length was very adequate. Now is the time for us to wrap up today's session. In relation to the last question posed by Professor Park, in the past we talked about the economics of the NSR. I believe now is the time for us to talk more about reliability of the services and reliability of the route. In particular, because of the climate change and extreme weathers in the Arctic region, there was a severe melting of the ice, and because of the quality of the melting ice was very poor. That is why it prevented the vessels from entering into the NSR. So I believe not just the entrance into the NSR, but also the safe navigation through the NSR would be the most important factor going forward. What we are talking about is rather ironical. The cargoes would be iron ores, minerals, and oils and fuels, but we are talking about net zero. I do not think that everything will change overnight. It will change over time gradually. And I believe the NSR going forward will need to go in line with the movement of the global community, such as the carbon neutrality and the climate change responses. Only then we'll be able to ensure the starting point for the green ports as well as the green vessels. With that, I'd like to conclude today's seminar. Thank you very much for your time and attention. And I hope you have a safe return home. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Lee. This concludes the 10th International Arctic Shipping Seminar. I would like to thank all the speakers from abroad, especially from Russia and Norway, who had to wake up at such an early hour. Thank you very much.